What is up, guys? Welcome to the Unfazed Facts Podcast, a podcast dedicated to all things Gym Leader Challenge. I'm Joshua Benson, and I'm here with Jeff Baisch, and we are going to be talking about Gym Leader Challenge today. Kind of starting on a new little mini series of what is Gym Leader Challenge, kind of spur some conversation, talk about some things in Gym Leader Challenge that makes it Gym Leader Challenge, what exactly is it? And today, Jeff, our focus is going to be Singleton's strategic weight on Gym Leader Challenge and how that shapes deck consistency, optimality, and creativeness in the format. Why do we make the decisions that we make in Gym Leader Challenge? Whether you're playing for fun or playing competitively in the format, what drives us? And, Singleton format really spurs a lot of tough choices. Wouldn't you say, Jeff?
Yeah, 100%. And I always think back, there was an episode that we did earlier, Josh, and this is before you were with us full time, back with Zach, Z-Man Cuddles. And, we kind of I did a deck building episode where he kind of talked through his process. And we brought up the word singleton a lot. And it's is Gym Leader Challenge really a singleton format when you have just the card pool that we have? And that was something that's always just comes up. I mean, you've got cards that basically functional reprints. You've got cards that, do more or less the same thing. So, singleton, is it a misnomer, Josh? I don't really know, but I do know that it matters a lot. It makes, decision trees difficult when you go to deck building. And, it's made my life, especially when I think about that 61st, that 62nd, that 63rd card in my list, made it quite difficult when I'm trying to be competitive or even just having fun in Gym Leader Challenge.
Dude, you hit the nail on the head. Whenever it comes to 61st, 62nd, 63rd cards, I think everybody has their 5 cards that they would immediately put in if there wasn't that other card that you wanted to put in. And, if you've ever had that problem, let us know what your first, second, third card would be to put into it if something else was missing. It'd be really cool to know. I think one of mine is usually something I don't like Timer Ball, but Timer Ball would be one that I would put in. Enhanced Hammer is always one of those top 5 because you can get rid of special energies. And there's a lot of very important special energies in the format that really get a specific decks rolling, like an Okie Dokie. If you get rid of that, you can take away its health and attack power really quickly. But what are some cards that you guys have struggled with putting into a deck, and why? But not only is Gym Leader Challenge a singleton format, it's also a monotype format where you can only play one type of Pokemon. And really that puts the limit down even more than just being limited to one copy per card or name. Now you're limited down to what is available to you through that monotype format. So if you're playing water cards or blue cards, you have to play just water cards, and vice versa with psychic, purple, and so on and so forth. And that can really limit the deck consistency depending on the type that you're playing.
Yeah. I mean, it's really kind of unbalanced in Gym Leader Challenge too when you look at it, because and we talk about CRC, and Josh and I were how much are we going to bring up CRC tonight? Consistency, redundancy, and the comeback potential. And when you look at just the best types, which I think we all agree, colorless, water, psychic are all up there and top tier consistency decks. You look at the card pool that they have available to them. You look at the abilities that they have, and the monotype restriction. If you only have one card that does one thing for you, but another type has 2 or 3 cards that can do that same thing for them, prizing becomes a bigger factor. All of a sudden the singleton factor becomes a bigger factor, because if your Dynamotor is prized, well, Psychic has access to a slew of ways to accelerate energy. So if one of theirs is prized, it's not such a big deal. They get that little bit of redundancy, and of course that builds into consistency. So it's just monotype, it's restrictive. Singleton, it's restrictive. But Josh, that's why we love Gym Leader Challenge, right? That's why we came to this format. It's unique. It's different. It's different than what other card games have to offer, even in their, casual singleton formats, which we'll get to here in a second. That's why we love GLC. It's tough. The deck building is tough. It really pushes you to limit, and at the same time, it really opens up the format and gives you room to brew.
Yeah, and you mentioned just now, we're talking about singleton format, and you said that Psychic has, 2 different ways to get energies out of the discard pile. Well, you compared that with Lightning, and Lightning actually has literally 2 Dynamotors, which is hilarious.
Yeah,
it's the same ability name and the same attack, the same HP. It's basically what you said, that pretty much reprinted just with a different name. And another deck that kind of has that going for it as well, Water has 2 Rain Dancers. It doesn't have the same exact lineup of HP, but it's still both stage 2, but it does, effectively the same thing. And
you got a Frostmoth in there too, right? That's a
Frostmoth as well.
3 potentially in Water.
Yeah, 100%. And you've got those very consistent pieces. Like if one of them is prized and you play both, you have the ability to make the other one as well, which, is, you asked a question earlier, is it actually a singleton format whenever you're able to do that as well? Which I would say yes, but at the same time, no. It's just like that fine line.
Yeah. It's a singleton format for certain types, right?
Yes.
Like you look at fighting and you're like, well, fighting has 2 Dynamotors, right? It's got Garganackle that can take an energy from the discard pile, just 1 fighting energy. And then you have Colossal, and those are stage 2s, and those are, they're fine. They're not Dynamotors that Lightning, and they're not the equivalent that Psychic has, but like they exist. But like prizing comes into play, the ability to get those cards into play because of less consistent other parts of the engine really bring it down too. So it feels like fighting is almost playing a different game where singleton affects them more than some of these other stronger types. And so that's just what it is. But again, we love our types. GLC is unbalanced. It will never be balanced as long as people aren't printing cards specifically for the format. It's just the way it is. And again, we love it. We love it for all its quirks. And we love it for all that it is. We accept you, GLC, for who you are.
We accept you as you are, GLC. But yeah, it is definitely an unbalanced format because of the things that are available for one type than another type. But, we have for fighting, you mentioned fighting. Fighting is going to be getting a consistency bump in Mega Evolutions. We'll talk about that in another podcast. And we're going to be talking about some different cards that are available for different types later on. I'm excited to get into that. But it's really cool to see some support being built in or printed for those types that haven't been seeing so much success. So it'll be kind of cool to see that. I'm not a big fan of having to have, so in fighting, you're going to be having a Pokemon available to you, but you're having to have it a stipulation to where something has to be on the bench in order to use the ability. And whenever you have stipulations like that, I'm not the biggest fan necessarily. And we'll get into packages here in a little while. Yeah, we're going to get into packages.
Read my mind. Packages, baby.
I did. Keep that in your mind, guys. Keep packages in your mind. But I don't know if you guys know it. Jeff has played and enjoys Magic the Gathering as well. And there's a little bit of thing. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, Magic's fine. Magic is always fun.
It's just fine. But with the inspiration of GLC kind of coming from Magic the Gathering's Commander format, where it's a singleton format. I'm not sure. Is it also Monotype as well?
So your commander is typed. So whatever commander you get, and you can, there's 5 colors in Magic. So you can have a 5-color commander, and you could have a card in every type. But if you have a blue-red, you can only have cards in your deck that have, blue-red in them. And of course artifacts and the like. But that's kind of the deal with commander. So similar to Gym Leader Challenge, a little less restrictive And obviously, you have access to your commander at any point in the game as long as you can, cast its mana cost. I'm not going to get into all the rules of Magic, but yeah, similar but different.
Yeah, like energy, lands, or mana.
Yeah.
Is that similar in that sense?
Yeah. So yeah, you have lands. You play one land per turn. And Magic, and this is where like a lot of the people that I play with are former Magic players that are coming to Gym Leader Challenge, and so it's really easy for Pokemon players to be like, well, I don't have like a good attach this turn. Like, I'm not going to attach this because I don't have any attackers in play and I want to conserve my energy for a later use. So like Pokemon players see that and instinctively just like, don't attach this turn. That's the right play. But as Magic players, we're drilled, hit your land drops. So every single turn, we want to be playing lands out. And so you'll see Magic players will play energy on things that they shouldn't from time to time. That's just a Magic gameplay perspective. But, some of the other key differences, Josh, obviously, and the biggest difference, the one that we're going to kind of touch on here, is 100 cards in Commander versus 60 cards in Gym Leader Challenge. And
I can imagine that being, I imagine that is completely different in Magic having 100 and Pokemon having a 60, depending on the cards available to you in Pokemon because of, the bench space, as opposed to Magic where you have just the field, right?
Unlimited space. You can cast as many creatures as you'd like. And I was kind of at first when I was getting a GLC and I was having difficulty nailing down choices. Again, that 61st, that 62nd, that 63rd card. I was like, man, this would maybe be interesting as a 100 card matchup. But you brought it up, Josh. That bench, the 6 bench space for your Pokemon is really what restricts the format, where I think that 60 cards is ideal. If you went into the 100 card range, like you can't really find space for more Pokemon because, again, the game itself is restricting you there. So, what cards are you putting into your deck? And everything would just be this like, pile of mush. Maybe we're all mulliganing into oblivion. It just 100 cards just doesn't make sense for Gym Leader Challenge. But again, in Commander, there's a lot of room. And Commander is definitely a lot more of a casual format. Like, just because of the nature of the game, right? Like, you're playing against 3 other people. It's hard for you at any given point to really have like a drastic effect on the game when there's 3 other people that could potentially be fighting against you, right? There's a lot more politics involved. And in Gym Leader Challenge, it's 1v1. So it's just you trying to beat your opponent. So there's obviously like the competitiveness there comes into play. You have a lot more control over what's going on the board. Whereas in Commander, someone's like, you know what? You spilled my coffee. I'm going to target you this game. And all of a sudden you're like, what did I do? And it just like Commander could go off the rails.
Spilled the coffee.
Yeah, Commanders can go off the rails. But in Gym Leader Challenge, it's just you and your opponent, 60 cards in a deck. Get those 6 prizes. 6 prizes is another way too. Prizing, like 4 decks to win. Prizing is the way to win, right? There's no like infinite life gain combos that happen in Commander, or no infinite damage loops really in Gym Leader Challenge. So like your win cons are, I'm going to take prizes one by one. So, within that too, there's less to do in Gym Leader Challenge than in Commander. Plus, you have like an extra 10 years worth of cards in Commander. So for me, deck building in Gym Leader Challenge a lot more restrictive, but again, fun to play.
So, speaking on the Commander format, is there in Magic anything like a play set? Is it kind of like Pokemon where a play set is 4 cards, or is there an unlimited amount of a specific type?
Yeah, it's on like constructed formats, things like, Modern, which is a format that's near and dear to my heart, one that I still play, and Pioneer and Standard. It's the 4-of rule. Obviously, basic lands get around that rule, but yeah, 4-of is what you can play.
So just like Pokemon, it's 4, which is really cool to see the similarities in the games. I guess they both kind of came out at the same time. I believe Magic came out first.
Well, they're both made by WotC, Wizards of the Coast.
Oh, that's right.
The original printing, and obviously the game has changed. Like, I play a lot of retro based at the Fossil, and back in the day, you didn't have supporters and items, you just had trainers. So you could
Yeah.
play Professor's Research. You could play 4 of those in a turn. There was no supporter clause. That's why Mill was so good back in the day, as everyone was just like churning through their deck, discarding. Superior energy retrieval existed. So those games, those based at the Fossil and even Jungle and all those farther on, maybe even Neo and beyond, were just kind of miserable, like get rid of your energy sort of dealios. But yeah, both been my Watsy, and yeah, you can see the similarities. And obviously, when you look at Pokemon, I always think this, Josh, and I hope I don't get grilled for this. I think Pokemon's kind of a poorly designed game in general. But I do think it's the best way that a trading card game could mimic what the VGC was. So I give a lot of props to making the card game feel like the VGC. But like, man, talk about 2-for-1s, man. Like, when you take a prize and you get to draw a card, like, that's the worst. It's just a 2-for-1 all over the place.
Feels good, bro. Feels good.
Feels bad, bro. Feels bad.
Depending on what side it's happening on, you know. But, you know, speaking of play sets, cards do similar things. So, like, when we're looking into building decks, you know, redundancy, building and having cards that do the same thing to make it easier for you or make the chances higher of you drawing into that on your first turn or being able to get that top deck. Having cards that can do, let's say, for instance, this draw. You know, you want to have cards that can draw. So you want to play cards in your deck that have at least 3 to 5, maybe upwards 6 of cards that can specifically do that. And, you know, just like whenever you're playing in a standard format, or if you're playing Magic, where you can play a playset of 4, you're always playing those really good cards. A lot of the time, you're going to play 4 of. So when we're playing Gym Leader Challenge and we're wanting draws, you have Marnie, you have Cynthia, you have Judge, you have Iono, you have N, you have all these cards that do specific things, Professor's Research. And depending on what you want to do with your deck, again, speaking that it's a singleton format, and you have all these draw cards, you have, okay, do I want to play Research? Because if I do, I'm going to have to discard this hand. And a lot of the time you might be discarding singleton resources that you might not be able to get back. Or would you rather play N or Iono? One, you shuffle your whole hand into your deck and draw however many prizes. The other, you shuffle it, put it on the bottom of your deck, draw as many as you have prizes. And it's like you have all these questions, you know. Do you want to keep resources in the deck? Do you want to put the resources at the bottom of the deck, in the deck, or in the discard pile? So you have all these different things to think about when you're playing specific cards. And I'm just using drawing, for example, right now, but you have all sorts of different supporter cards that either draw, cheat energy into play, move your opponent's Pokemon around, and just stuff like that are very, very similar. There's multiples of those that can do the same thing. Not for every type, but a lot of types. And some of them can play in every type, such as the draw cards or a gust card, which can, you know, bring your opponent's Pokemon for the bench to the active. But there's all sorts of these different cards that do similar things. And it's super helpful that you have the ability to be able to play all these different cards at multiple different times.
Yeah. In a way, you know, and this is why we brought up playsets, right? Playsets do exist, right? Like, again, you mentioned all these draw cards. They do similar things, and then you can kind of pick and choose the best cards. And you brought this up, and this is kind of the most important thing about Singleton is resource conservation, right? Like, every deck is only playing a set amount of recovery cards. And if you're playing Research and you're discarding, you know, you're getting rid of those cards, that's not so great. So you just have your option. You get to pick another card that does a similar thing, that doesn't discard. Cynthia's one less card. Sure, you might draw into some of those cards. But if you're a deck that has a combo, especially a mid to late game combo, just play Cynthia. And that's kind of where like your creativeness can come into play in these singleton formats. Is research a more powerful card? Yes. Do a lot of decks play 4 of when that card is in the format, which, let's be honest, it's always in the format these days, it feels like. Yes. But again, you have to keep in mind what your deck is trying to do. And that's just the hardest part of these singleton decks, is finding an optimal 60 of your list that's doing what it needs to do. And it just takes tons of testing, and it just takes a lot of error.
Yeah, 100%. And to kind of like stem off of that, you mentioned optimality, and you have your optimal lineups for all decks, which is like what we call staples. And you have boss's orders. You have Guzma as ways of gust to get your opponent's Pokemon in the active spot to either knock them out or stall them, or to get something that's preventing you from doing something out of the active, such as a Galarian Wheezing, and just stuff like that. And then you have not so optimal lineups like Rhyme, which just is a one-sided escape rope where you're pushing something out of the active. But there are decks that can utilize that to a point. Now, let's say if we put Rhyme into a water deck, that would just be silly, because water has access to, it's not Manaphy, it's Fion, that has the ability Whirlpool Suction, which can push something out of the active if it's on the bench, and then you basically shuffle that back into your deck, or put it on the bottom of your deck, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put Rhyme into a water deck, that'd just be silly, because you have access to Fion that does that specific thing. Do you have any cards that kind of come up to mind, optimal lineups, staples, and like different? I know that you wanted to really touch on packages, that you're not going to put one specific card into your deck. You might think you're putting one, but you might actually be putting 4, 5, 6. The amount in a package is actually could be endless, could be the entire deck, depending on what your game plan is.
Yeah, 100%. And like, we'll just start easy, right? Ball Guy is like one of the best cards in all of Gym Leader Challenge since its inception. It's been a staple. It's been around. But Ball Guy, again, it's not just the supporter. You got to run balls. And everyone's talking about which balls do you run, Josh? And so people are like, if you're running 5, is Ball Guy worth it? Well, maybe if Hisuian Heavy Ball is super important to you. And then if you're a type like, Psychic, that really leans heavily on evolutions, that's going to need access to Timer Ball, going to need access to Hisuian Heavy Ball. Do you run that even though you have cards like Fog Crystal and Mysterious Treasure? And you're like, I think it's probably worth it, just because, again, what your deck is trying to do makes that package worth all of those spaces. And then you even get beyond that. And there's some decks that I felt like, not only do I want a Ball Guy, but because of how important getting evolutions into play in, I'm going to throw an Apricorn Maker. An Apricorn Maker might mean that you're playing, all the typical ball cards: Quick Ball, Nest Ball, Level Ball, Ultra Ball, Hisuian Heavy Ball, but you might be throwing Heavy Ball, a type-specific ball. So that's just an example of, like, again, one card choice might, change like the entire makeup of your deck. If I take Timer Ball out of my deck now, is my Ball Guy as useful? Now am I making 2 cuts instead of 1? That's a package. And you see that a lot with cards like Battle Compressor, for example, when people put Battle VIP Pass in their deck. Well, Battle VIP Pass sure is a card, but people want to make sure they hit it on turn 1. So we saw there was an NAIC Lightning list by Dino, and they were playing the more Pico that lets them peek at the top card of their deck. Mm-hmm. And they just wanted and you can discard it, and they just wanted as many ways as possible to get that card on turn 1. So they're playing maybe greens in that style deck. They're playing Arvin to get Battle VIP Pass, Trainer's Mail, all these different cards to help hit this one card. So again, it's not just one card in your deck. You're making deck concessions for these singleton cards that you're adding in. So again, when you're thinking about packages, Frostmoth, Baxcalibur, what goes with that. You're going to be playing Professor's Letter. You're going to be playing Capacious Bucket. Again, it's not just one card. And that's where these powerful synergy decks really, really can struggle in the kind of like finding space. Like we hear people say it all the time, Josh, man, this list is tight. Well, what does that mean? It just means that you have a lot of powerful synergies, and your powerful synergies require multiple cards to function. Whereas if you look at some decks, like, I'm just throwing out like Drago Box, for example, like Drago Box is such a creative deck because it doesn't have a lot going on in the Pokemon suite. And then when you look at some of the synergies it has, it's just trying to get extra energy in play. So when that's all your deck has going on, you can run all of these tech cards or like neat cards within your deck to kind of solve some issues. So I think Drago Box is like the perfect example of that. Whereas you look at a traditional Hydro Pump list and you're like, man, that's running 16 or 17 Pokemon. And then within the trainers, like this needs to be in the deck.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of wiggle room in a deck like that. And again, optimal lineups are really hard. It can be the difference between one or two cards. And then some decks can get away with, like, I think Drago Box runs one draw card because it just wants to search everything. It wants to be super exact about what it's trying to do. Another good example, like another Drago Box style deck, is the really fast dark deck, like the Donk Dark deck.
Yeah.
Again, not a lot of evolutions going on in that deck. Not a lot of energy attachments needed. So again, one energy attach attack. You can run a lot of tech cards. You can run Hustle Belt if you want to, which is a really cool and fun card. I'm glad that Phoenix was working on that deck a while ago, and that deck became a thing. But again, when you're running less Pokemon, when you have less going on, you're running individually powerful cards that don't need a lot else going on, you can really start to include some of these cards we consider 61st, 62nd cards into your deck.
Yeah, a lot of the time whenever you are playing, you mentioned Drago Box, a deck that's not playing really that many Pokemon, as opposed to a water Hydro Pump deck that is playing upwards 18 different Pokemon, and you see Drago Box playing 5 to 6. Yeah. 5 to 6 is crazy depending on if you want to play Kyurem or not. And it's like, hey, you have so much space to be able to work with here. You have so much space to be able to work with. Like whenever it comes to, let's say, whenever I was really refining my water deck, my Tanky water deck, I was like, okay, what do I put in here? I've got to have a lot of heal cards. I've got to have a lot of switch cards because sometimes you need to be able to get in and out of that active. And you got some big boys that you have to move around. You got to have special energies, but you can't have too much special energy and not enough basic energy. So you have to have a fine line between there. But some kind of new things that I saw going on is like the question of, do you play Hisuian Basculin or do you play Alolan Vulpix? Now, I'm a big fan of Alolan Vulpix, but it goes, you can search anything you want. Evolution's basic, but it doesn't go straight on the bench. But then you have Basculin. You can search out 2 basic and put them straight to your bench. Now, I used to run both of those, but we're talking about space in a singleton format. I had to sacrifice that because there were some other things like the Titan that had come out where I was like, oh man, this is the perfect partner to this big whale. So we got 2 whales here just going crazy, just huge guys, and we got to find space. So what do? We take out one of those possibly consistency pieces out so we can, figure out, okay, how is this going to run? I saw an example of, the Swampert with the power draw 3. You can discard draw 3, and you're always going to be able to discard draw 3, unless if your ability is canceled. Now, Octillery has always been one of the forefronts, always one of the things that you would automatically put into a water deck. It was considered a staple until we recently saw, Ben Morse recently put in Swampert Power Draw 3 to be able to get, he was worried about, hey, am I always going to be able to draw with Octillery? Let's put in this Swampert. Now, personally, I'm going to choose Octillery over that because packages, right? When it comes to packages in Gym Leader Challenge, my specific water list doesn't play rare candy because I'm only playing one stage 2, and that's all I want to play is one stage 2 because I don't want to have to package in rare candy and then, anytime you have 2 stage 2s, you got to have rare candy. You just have to. If you have one, you can kind of get away with it, especially if you're playing the Intellion list, like the Intellion engine. You don't necessarily worry about getting rare candy. You can drizzle and get what you need pretty quick still with its ability. But those are just like some examples I can think off the top of my head, like optimal lineups. Like for you, is it Swampert Power Draw 3 or is it Auxiliary? Auxiliary, you can only draw up to 5. Swampert, you can discard draw 3 always,
Yeah. And I think one of the things, and it comes back to this, right? Is there's so many tough decisions when you have 60 cards in a singleton format. And I think that in that Ben Morse list, they weren't running Frostmoth. I know that he's been kind of off that card. So when you're not accelerating energy from your hand, you're not getting your hand size down. So having the Swampert to draw you forward more makes more sense in a list like that when you're not able to just dump your hand. There's a lot of plays when you look at some of these Hydro Pump lists that play Peony, discard your hand. And a lot of times you'll see that card get played and they'll go and grab, Capacious Bucket and Professor's Letter, grab 4 energies, attach all 4 energies, and now they've seen 4 brand new cards. And it's just kind of ridiculous what they can do with Auxiliary. And then you have the Whales list, which is like set up a whale, sit behind it, relax, is what I see a lot of players do. So the power draw makes a lot of sense there, but it's a package. It's a package. It's all about packages.
That's a perfect example of like a package. That was very well said right there.
Again, every pod I get 1.
You get 1. You get 1 point.
I get one good point. But that's just what it is, man. It's like, well, and I'm a big fan of synergies, Josh, and that's where like my biggest stuff comes in. Like I want the card to work, and I know that in like the top tier decks in Gym Leader Challenge, you look at a lot of them and you're like, these are just combinations of good cards, right? You look at the Psychic lists that are running around, you're like, that's a deck of good cards. It can function without these pieces. And then you look at some other decks, like I really like the Colossal list in Fighting, and that's a synergy list. It needs things to happen for it to work, and you have to set your deck up in a way for it to be successful. And those individual deck choices, it might be the difference between one card. Like if you had just drawn this one card, your whole game would have been different. So how do you make it consistent enough to get to that card that you need? The Colossal decks not only need to set up, but they need to have energy in the discard pile, and they need to have an attacker in the active. And there's just a lot that needs to go right in these synergy decks. But when it happens, it's so good. It's one of those feelings just like, man, my deck is doing the thing. Whereas like if I'm like, oh, I drew Colress Tenacity and I got Double Dragon Energy and I've attached it to Raging Bolt. Well, you could have gotten Double Dragon Energy in multiple ways. So it's not really a synergy. It's just 2 really strong cards that happen to work well together. And so you get a lot more space in those dragon decks for that reason. Synergies, baby. Synergies.
Oh, yeah, synergies. And, speaking of synergies, Fire sometimes has a lot of cool synergy, but isn't able to live up to its potential a lot of the time. And basically, I think, honestly, it has a lot of good cards. But a couple cards that come to mind are Welder, Blacksmith, And if you have, like Welder, I believe it's attach up to 2 fire energy from your hand. 2 fire energy from your hand onto your one Pokemon.
Yeah,
and then Blacksmith, draw 3 with it too, which is an amazing card. Why would that not be? Why would Fire not be that great? And then you have Blacksmith, 2 from the discard pile to one of your Fire Pokemon. Now let's say, kind of like speaking on cards that are available to certain types and not others. Let's say that Water had those 2 cards, and instead of attach Fire, it was attach Water. Attach 2 Water, draw 3. How much more powerful does that card become being in Water with Water's consistency?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much better, right? Because when you think about it, like Drizzile is just going to get you one of those pieces. And like the issue that fire just has is like it needs so much to work, and that's what we're getting at with this, right? It just needs so much to work, and its best cards, the two cards you just mentioned too, are anti-synergistic. One from hand, one from your discard pile. Then you throw in Salazzle, and you have to discard to draw 3 with Salazzle. That doesn't work well with Welder. And again, Welder is a busted card when you read it on the surface. And then you have Giant Hearth. And Giant Hearth, discard a card, go get 2 energy. That works great with Welder. But unless you're discarding a fire energy, it doesn't work great with Blacksmith. And it's just like fire wants to push and pull. And then it wants to put Macargo on its bench. And it wants to pair Macargo with another stage 1. And then that's 2 spots on your bench. And then you have a slew of other options you can go with to charge up things. And it's just like, it feels like it should work, but it doesn't. And, you mentioned if those cards were in other types, you're just like, wow. Like you look at Welder and what Welder does in colorless. I don't know if you guys have ever played against a Welder colorless list, but it's amazing how that can work, right? You put Mela in those colorless lists. Again, bonkers what they can do. And in Fire, you're just like, that's okay. You attach a fire energy, you drew up to 6. Cool. You know what I just did with Frostmoth and Octillery? I attached some energy and drew up to 5. And it was so much easier. And I get to do it every turn.
Yeah. It is definitely interesting to think about like specific typed cards that you can only play in specific types because it was made for that type and how well or not well they would fit into other types. Water and Psychic have a supporter card that allows you to, in any combination, get up to 4 Pokemon or basic energy cards from the discard pile. And how amazing would that be for some other types as well, being able to get all sorts of resources back and having the flexibility of, do I want it to all be energy? Do I want it to all be Pokemon? Do I want half and half? Do I want 3 and 1? And stuff like that. And just some of these really good types that you see on the top, like Water, Psychic, Colorless, not so much now, but I think people are coming back to Colorless and having access to cards like this kind of puts them on the top because they have the availability to them. And also different play styles as well. Psychic, there are a ton of different decks for Psychic, a ton of different decks for Water, but not so much for Fire necessarily. There are a lot of decks, but there are not so many working decks for Fire. Kind of the same thing with Metal. There's not a whole lot going for Metal. Grass seems to be one of those decks that could have lots of things going for it and kind of get nowhere, but maybe we might see a little bit different with this new card coming out, Lush Forest. But like, how can we be creative in these different decks? And let's say if you want to have fun, like, do you want to play your Pokemon that, let's say, let's off the cuff Pokemon. So I know in Metal, back before we had Metal Maker, Matang, we had this cool Metagross with emergency entry that if you top decked it would go straight to the bench, and you were like, oh, this is great. You drew 3 cards. Like, during that time, there wasn't a whole lot of ways to get that on to the top of your deck. So you were like, okay, how can we get this to actually work? And it didn't work really too well, but you had a card called Switching Cups that you could put in, an example of a small package to be able to then put it onto the top of your deck and be able to hopefully have it work. But if it didn't work, then you just have this dead Metagross in your deck, So like, what are some different ways that we can, like, do you want to play competitively? Do you want to have fun? But sometimes having fun doesn't necessarily let you even play the game because you have to build the deck around that specific piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I think that's 100% right. I think we've all fallen to that trap before, where we've hyper focused on an idea. And that the Metagross is a perfect example because, you mentioned it being a small package, man. It's Mallow, it's Now it's Cypher Maniacs is your package. Max Revive, you've discarded it. Max Revive puts it back on top of your deck. And then you do all this, and your opponent's just like hand disruption or make you shuffle draw, and all of a sudden your entire game plan's gone. And it's like, cool, like that card is powerful. And I think that card is even powerful enough that you might not even need a small package. Just run it in your deck, naturally draw it. At some point you might evolve your Matang. But like, are you diluting your deck to fit in these packages? And it's fun. Like, we want to play that Metagross. I want the thing to happen. There's the Electros that comes into play. You don't have to evolve it as long as you have 4 energy in play. And then the second that you put it into play, that 4 energy goes to the Electros. And I've been swept by a deck that does that before, So when that synergy works, it's so good and it's so busted. And then the second that your opponent is just KOing the stuff that has your energies on it, or you're unable to get the pieces to get that energy in play, all of a sudden, like, that game plan is off the table and you're stuck with some dead cards in your deck, which is the fun thing that you wanted to do. And you don't get to play the game because you're just staring at Electros in your hand, right? It's the card you top deck, and it doesn't get you anywhere. So, it's a tough decision to be like, do I want to play the game or do I want to play the fun thing? And sometimes you can get those two things to work. And sometimes it's just like you got to pick one or the other. And these days I've found myself being a little bit more like towards the consistency piece. I want to play the game because for me, there's really nothing worse. And I have limited free time. So when I sit down across the table from someone, like, I want to get the best from both sides out of what our decks can do. And so, if I sit down and all of a sudden, I'm dead drawing for multiple turns in a row, that's not a good feeling. And I know my opponent doesn't feel good either if they are winning because of something like that. So you definitely want to put those consistency pieces in your card. But again, do the fun thing too. We got to make it work.
I remember, early on when it first started, like, the creativity was seemingly endless.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people were finding new cards every day, and it seems like nowadays it's like becoming seldom you find a new card or a new deck that you have not seen before. And with new sets coming out, especially sets that are seemingly GLC focused, you have like a re-up of creativity that kind of hits the community, and it's always really cool to see different cards. I remember what was the grass snail?
Wo-Chien,
yes. I can't even remember his name. I remember when Wo-Chien came out, we were like, this deck, it's gonna be a meme.
It's a meme.
It still kind of is, but when it's a meme that can dream, dude.
Badged at my locals, man. Badged at my locals.
It's a dreaming meme. It can do it. It's really good. Wo-Chien as a Pokemon is a meme, but the deck actually, worked. And I know that, Z-Man Cuddles did a really great job with being creative. He's one of the most creative deck builders in the community, always thinking about different things, and made Wo-Chien work. And the haters really,
You were a hater, Josh.
swallow their pride. I wasn't too big of a hater. It's a grass snail, bro. And then Alex Carpenter takes it and wins it. Wins one of the Full Grip Games locals as well with it. And you see, the dream in action of, the how creative we were able to get with that deck. And it was really cool to see that. But you just see that seldomly unless a new set comes out.
Yeah. And I like I understand the point of that argument. And I think part of it is just that, like, there are so many people involved in the Gym Leader Challenge community right now. So, like, most thoughts have been thought of. Like, that's the problem, right? When you've got, and back in the day, like, I can think of like 3 or 4 top deck builders who everyone was looking at consistently. And it was basically just the Mahone meta, right? Whatever Andrew Mahone was playing on his Tricky Gym stream was what people were going to play. And then there were a couple Cardboard Warriors guys that were doing, and some other tournaments, because there were more online tournaments when we had access to PTCGO. Whatever was winning those tournaments too, people were looking at and kind of being like, I kind of like that. And that's kind of how I got into the first couple lists that I wanted to do. So it's just, there's just more people look at it now. And, you look at some of the decks that have popped up recently. Wo-Chien is a perfect example of it. New cards definitely inspire people to do new things. And again, the single card, because we're a singleton format, a single card can birth a new archetype. And like Wo-Chien did that, right? All of a sudden you got Pokestop Grass. Like if it wasn't Wo-Chien, it would just be a Pokestop Grass deck. But now it's got Wo-Chien in it, and it's just one card changed that type. And that might have been and might still be the best grass deck, at the moment. And it's just crazy to think about that deck and what it's done. You looked at like before the Lost Zone stuff got printed. That Lost Zone Psychic deck didn't really exist. Then that's a very obvious one to point out.
Yes.
There's just so many cards like that. Like Okie Dokie 2 is another one. People started making these salty dog lists. Earthquake builds kind of like, looked fine. And then like, Okie Dokie comes in, it's just like, this card's good. We should just recur this card over and over again. And now you see like the new Garganackle that attaches energy and heals paired with the Okie Dokie means that you can recur these cheap attackers over and over again. So that's just so cool about when new sets come out. One new card unlocks an entire archetype. And, Craig here mentions in our chat, bans, Josh. Bans are the other thing that really encourage people to start brewing again. And I think Colorless is probably the example we can look at now for that.
Yeah. Bans truly, even though sometimes they can feel extremely bad in the moment, can actually, like you said, inspire people to actually, dig deeper into that type for the format. And you see it take a dip because people were really into colorless for the way it was, and now it's not. And it's just kind of a different deck, but it's still the same deck. It's just people don't want to play it as much. And we'll see, a resurgence of people into colorless. But then you see all the other decks that are also affected, and they're trying to get their way up. I know that you've been trying to work on a dark deck, trying to get it, back to where it also once was, because it's different now. And bans do that, but they also inspire new deck building to, like, let's say you had those. Sometimes these bans can even make the 61st to 63rd card change, because now you might be able to fit it, or you have to put a completely different package in there to get it working the way it once was. But bans can definitely do that. And what the most recent ban did with double colorless and twin energy, it was basically one of those things that we were talking about earlier, like one of those instances where it wasn't a singleton format. It was two of the same energy, just with different names. And you see that with Blastoise Baxcalibur. You see that with Flaffy Electric. You see that with, you don't necessarily see that with Malamar and Xatu. They're two different cards.
They're different.
But effectively kind of do the same thing.
Same role, different way to do it.
Yeah. But they're effectively the same exact thing, but they also don't impact the format as much as those cards necessarily did. Will we ever see a ban on it? Probably not, because it's doesn't affect it to that much. So in that instance, that ban was one of those bans that needed to happen. It just, nobody wanted to happen. Wanted it to happen at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny, because, talking about a resurgence, was it kind of like a fake resurgence too? Because you look at so many formats that I've played, right after a banning, everyone just brings out their pet deck immediately after a banning, right? And everyone's playing their pet deck, and they're like, yes, colorless is gone. My deck is good again. I can play grass spread. Woo! And then it's still not good. Like, grass spread's still going to lose the stuff. So like sometimes we, after a banning specifically, sometimes we get our hopes up about how strong things can be, and grass spread's one of them. One deck to think about. It's probably never going to be good until they print something major.
Was that you poking at me, bro? You poking at me?
Dude, I love grass spread. That was like my first YouTube video.
Lush Forest. Do you think Lush Forest would make it slightly better? Because you could get Hop-It and then evolve it straight into Skiploom, but Skiploom lets you search the deck, so it'll let you immediately get into it.
Yeah, I mean, but
on turn 2.
The versions I was playing were playing like Wally too. Like there were versions of the deck I was playing that you could like Wally. So like you could still Wally attach, right? And that was still not good. So maybe this is better because you can get other things set up too while you're
you can play Chorus's Tenacity.
Maybe. I don't know.
Pokegear.
I'm much more excited about the double attack grass deck. Because the Lush Forest makes that a lot more recurable, right? Like one Lana's Aid and you're back into it, right? With either card. So I don't know. I think if there is a spiritual successor to Grass Spread, it is the double attack grass deck. I think it's time for us all to give up on Grass Spread. I love that Celebi too. That XY promo Celebi is like my favorite card. And it's just like, I don't think you can play it right now.
We're talking about creativity right now, and what's going through my head is the old YouTube video that's titled "Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared." Have you ever seen that video?
I haven't. Please explain.
Oh my goodness. So it starts off, right, with just these, like, I guess Sesame Street looking characters, and they're just in there, and it kind of like starts beat bopping, and you're like, yeah. And then, they're singing about, let's think creatively, and they're just like singing, and it's like nice. It kind of turns into like not a rap, but just like he's talking fast, and then it's just really happy go lucky. And then you start to notice like little things, and there's like a violin that starts to kind of be playing in the background, but like off key, and then things start to sing a little bit quicker. It starts to cut to strange images real quick, and then eventually it gets to where there's like scenes of raw meat being squished and smashed, and dude, you probably wouldn't like it actually.
As a vegetarian, that does sound not up my alley, but I can't appreciate the point, because that is my life with Grass Spread, is exactly that. Like, oh cool, I just took 6 prizes in a turn. Oh no, I can't set up for the 3rd game in a row. Oh no, my only Pokemon
that video
is
gets
Celebi.
That video gets epic.
Coin flip.
Oh yeah, that video gets crazy. I'll have to send it to you after this.
Send it. I'll bear through the meat part to watch it. It sounds fun. We'll share it with our viewers too.
It's insane. Yeah. You can. Yeah, this will be perfect for just the live format. We'll just watch it after this live. But yeah, creativity in GLC is super important for the well-being and the health of the format. We always want creative people making new decks, making new innovations that can push the format further, or just keep the format, fresh and fun. And you never know what's going to happen and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, I'll only be that with my own pet deck, but people like Z-Man, and there are other people out there that do that with just about any type, with any different Pokemon that they think is going to be, hey, this Wo-Chien, this Copperajah, this thing right here is going to be good. I think it's going to be good. Let's build around that, and then kind of build out from that.
Yeah. Is that your strategy, Josh, when you go to build a deck? I mean, obviously, I know that you like that Copperajah. Do you like pick a card and you go, I want that to work? So you start with like the singleton card you want to work and then build around it? Or are you like, this is the shell? What cards fit in this shell already?
So in my mind, there's a shell of staples that are interchangeable. Your ball cards, your supporters, your draw supporters, your resource getters. And then from there, I have that one card. And then I build out from that with the shell of these supporters are always a mainstay in decks that I want to play. And then how can I then add to that? So we get to like 60 cards, 70 cards, and then you start making your cuts and you ask yourself, is this going to be conducive to what the game plan is? If it's not, take it out. If you have too much that's conducive to that game plan, it can actually kind of bog you down a little bit. So like if, let's say you're back in the day, at one point, people were playing like upwards 6 to 7 draw cards. But what if you've been drawn through your deck the whole game, and now you're at the bottom of your deck and you got 3 draw supporters in your hand, and you wish you had something else like a resource to get those, or like a resource getter to be able to get that back out of the discard pile, So you have those things to think about. So usually, 2 to 4 cards is usually going to be the redundancy that you have going for in that deck. Which kind of brings me to like, is your deck more kind of a complex deck? Like, let's say complex deck being control format, or does it have a lot of resource decisions like a Lost Zone deck? Or is it more linear, like Hydro Pump is a very linear deck. Buddy Catch Psychic is a very linear deck. You have decks that are very kind of introductory into the format, and then you have Lost Zone, Control, different things like that are very resource heavy, very complex in the game plan and like decision making when going into it. Like, how do we shape that in this singleton format as well? Because we know that control decks where we're trying to get resources back and you have to take turns to get it back, but then you have to take turns to stall your opponent, get it back, stall your opponent, get it back. Or maybe Lost Zone, you're like, okay, I need to get to the Lost Zone as quickly as possible, get those 10 in the Lost Zone, get Sableye going. But you're like, oh man, I left this in the Lost Zone. As opposed to linear, it's like, I'm going to put as much energy on this wheel as possible, and then I'm going to attack you with it. And then if you hit me with it, I'm going to heal that damage off, which that's one of my favorites. I want to put this on there and you're going to hit me back and then I'm going to heal and do that. But I also very much love the Lost Zone deck as well. So I love the best of both worlds.
Yeah. I think those are some really good examples, because like, I think when you look at creativity in this format and you look at the complexity of the deck, I think a lot of times complexity and creativity will go hand in hand. And Ursaluna is a great deck. Colorless Control Ursaluna is a great deck to kind of point at, because you look at earlier drafts of that build and you look at the deck and you're like, cool. Like it obviously has kind of like a main game plan, but obviously it's all contextual because that's what control decks do. Get that Ursaluna in play. That's a huge part of it. Build a big hand is a huge part of what control decks want to do. And then you look at like the problems that deck kind of had, and obviously, the Teddy Ursa being susceptible to bench snipe, hand disruption being a big issue for it, especially when it was playing cards, search, 3 cards from your deck, put it into your hand, into your turn. It's Steven's something. I can't remember what it's called. But
Steven's Resolve, I believe.
Steven's Resolve, yeah. So you look at like that deck, and you're like, these are the problems that this deck has. And then you look at what Lion Chen did, and we talked about his deck list. We talked about his run at the Full Grip Games 3K. We looked at what his Ursaluna deck did, and it's playing the Ditto, that you can put the Teddy Ursa on top and evolve like Rare Candy into Ursaluna right away if you need to. And that was a solution to a problem the deck had. And it was a very creative solution to the deck's problem that like not a lot of people thought about. And that's a perfect example of, taking a problem, taking a deck that many would consider maybe tight. Like obviously it's got some room, and fixing it. And then the other problem was the hand disruption. And Lion Chen just said, I'm going to get to the bottom of my deck as quickly as possible. I'm going to play cards like Explorer's Guidance, Hapu. I'm going to play those cards, and I'm going to get to my in-game loop, and I'm going to make good decisions once I can get to the loop to do that in order to win games. And so, like, those are just prime examples of a complex deck that really lets creativity shine through. Like that is peak deck creativity there by Lion Chin for that Ursaluna build. And then you look on the flip side, talking about the Sableye Lost Zone decks. I mean, and we're mentioning Z-Man Kettles again. It's just really hard to talk about deck creativity without bringing up his name. But you know, you look at his Lost Zone build, and his Lost Zone build is like a very turbo deck, and he swears up and down that you're going to be getting 10 in the Lost Zone by turn 2 or 3 quite often, which is something that I'm still just like astounded by, like I'm amazed by. But I've seen him do it time and time again. I want to believe him. And then you look at, you know, kind of like the original Lost Circle build, which is by Subi, Tyler Matthews, who's an amazing player who we've talked about before, winning tournaments, standard and in Gym Leader Challenge. And we look at that build, and it's got like the Chimecho that slows things down. And so even within these archetypes that feel really closed off, like when you're looking at Lost Zone, which again, a very linear deck, it's got like 5 or 6 cards that you're trying to get to do the things. Sure, it's a combo deck, but it's still linear in what it's trying to do. And then you look at the variation between the different builds, and you're just like, that's so good. That's so good. That's creativity for me.
Yeah, I remember whenever I first saw Lost Zone being played in Gym Leader Challenge, and I was like, what? This has got to be terrible. And I believe it was on a Andrew Holmes stream on a Tricky Gym Conquest against JD DiMatteo, and I was like, wow, Lost Zone. I like that. Anyways, I had a buddy build it, and he didn't like it as much. So I was like, all right, looks like I'm going to build it then.
Ship it this way.
Yeah. I was like, let me see that deck, man. I want to play this thing. And I fell in love with it pretty quickly. Just mainly also because I was heavy Lost Zone player in standard format as well. And I just love it's both equally linear in its gameplay, but it's also decision making. Like, I'm going to have to get rid of this, and I'm never going to get it back for the rest of this game, So I enjoy being able to do multiple things and move a lot of cards, regardless of how slow I actually move. I like to do a lot of things in my turn, which is, one of the reasons why I have enjoyed Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit, because there's so much going on, and I could just move my hands and stuff like that. But it's really cool. And I think Gym Leader Challenge is really awesome. I'm, excited to continue this series a little bit more into, other aspects of Gym Leader Challenge other than just, the singleton monotypeness that it does bring.
Yeah. Good to get away from deck list. We had been talking about deck list for like 2 months straight. We had big tournament back to back to back to back to back. And then we had set review. And then you and I took a little bit of a break. Can't tell you how good it is just to be like, let's just talk shop. Let's just talk the nitty gritty behind the decks and not so much the good decks. We'll still talk those for sure. But again, just it's a refreshing new look at things for us to be able to talk about singleton and creativity.
Yeah, no slides to guide us, just a couple bullets. Yeah. And we were going.
I was nervous today because I was like, Josh, this is the least prepared I've ever felt, but maybe the most excited I've ever been about talking about what concept. I feel like we did a pretty good job, Josh.
Yeah,
I feel like we did a pretty good job.
Yeah. I already mentioned this, earlier in the podcast. If there are any decisions that you've, had to make a really hard decision in GLC, like maybe what type to play because of play style, because of the singletonness of the format and how heavy it weighs on one type to another, or, if there's a specific card that is always in your mind to put in your deck, but you just can't seem to fit it, we'd like to know any of it. We'd like to know any of that. Just down in the comments, just let us know. Give us a like, subscribe if you'd like to, but Jeff, you got anything else to say, man?
No, I actually, you know, besides people just telling us about their cards, I want to know if people have personal packages, Josh. Like, you know, those cards that are just like, those are the cards. Because, you know, for me, when I go to build a deck, I have a play style, right? I really like decks that have a lot of switch cards, have attackers for different situations. I think people would call those decks box decks to a certain degree. So I really enjoy those style of decks. So like you're going to see bird keepers in my list a lot. You're going to see flexible cards that have multi-use. You know, Arven's a good one. You know, people talk about Arven. Everyone loves it, but some people are like, Arven's not that good. It's just so good because of how flexible it is. But those are cards like just off the top of my head. I don't know right now if I would build a deck without Birdkeeper or Arven. But give me a package. Give me your package, your personal package. Josh, you got a personal package?
Honestly, one of my favorite packages right now is in water decks, and it's a super
Reversal Whale Lord.
Reversal Whale Lord. No, dude. Irida, Drizzle, and Aquapatch.
Of course. Are you playing Hilda, by the way? Are you playing Hilda in your water deck?
I haven't messed with it yet. It might be cool. We'll see. We'll definitely give it a try and something. We'll put it in there somehow. But yeah, I can't really think of a package right now other than, you know, Arven, Irida, Aquapatch, because I've just had so many fun blast off plays with Drizzle, Aquapatch, and Irida. It's just out of nowhere. Just like turn 2, you can get things going crazy. It's nuts.
Yeah. It's that pop off package.
Yeah, call it the pop off package. But yeah, hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video or the podcast, not the video. I'm in YouTuber mode right now. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. I've been here with Jeff. I am Joshua, and have a great week. Remember, stay thankful, and see you later.